All right, hi everyone, and happy Friday to you. You're right now watching this maybe on Friday itself or maybe during reading week as you finish up your essays and you review the first half of 4142. First off, apologies for the sort of more relaxed tone. I have a blanket up on here covering the window and the hat to try and keep the glare of the sun out of my eyes while I talk to you and to sort of keep the shine off the bald head into the camera. So again, I'm a little less formal than normal, but that's so you can actually see me as I engage with you now. Hopefully this will take one video, but it may take 2 or 3 to go through all of the material, because what I really want to do is wrap up this term and give you some closure to all the work that you've done so far in the first half of this 4142 contemporary children's culture. So let's begin then at the top as we go back through the original ideas of this course and the main ideas of the course we pulled back together. Now, the course is called Contemporary Children's Culture. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is contemporary children's culture? Can we define it? We should probably start there with the definition. And what we know already about this course is, as we've worked our way through it, is that no definition actually exists for contemporary children's culture. It's a made-up term. It's a term that we've made up here in children's studies at York University. Dr. Carpenter, when she founded the program, had this idea that we needed a course that brought together all the ideas of children's studies from the very beginning right through to the very end. And what it should do is it should encapsulate, it should really get to the heart of the spirit of who are children and what are children about, different or separate from the social construction of childhood. And to do that, then we need to have an understanding of children's own ideas, own lives, own experiences, own voice. And these were core ideas at the heart of the program from the very beginning. And so Dr. Carpenter thought about the idea of having a course that explored just that. And that's where the idea of contemporary children's culture came from. So we use it as a term to help us describe a phenomenon. It's a moment, a very particular moment in time and space. It's about giving structure to that moment in time and space. It's about giving voice to a silenced group of people or persons. So this is what contemporary children's culture, I guess, is, and why this course exists. So how then do we define it if there's no definition? Well, we can do this one of 2 ways. The first thing is we can look at it holistically and like a great big overarching statement, and we can say contemporary children's culture is, and then fill in the blank. And for your essay, I know you were all doing this, but somewhere in that discussion, that holistic breakdown of what contemporary children's culture is, or that overview, it should say something like contemporary children's culture is the exploration of children's real lives at the present moment in a very particular geographical space, recognizing that children are real and childhood is a social construction, but that social construction has real impact on the way young people live their lives. Contemporary children's culture seeks to engage with young people, seek out their voice, and provide spaces and avenues to hear that voice in a world so largely dominated by adult narratives about who children are and what they can or cannot be. Not bad, huh? And then we could also take the second approach to defining it would be to look at each of those words individually and break them down. So contemporary and children's and culture. And we've done this a little bit in class, where contemporary again refers to the present moment, the current moment, where we are right now. So not children from 2010 or 2008. And again, this is one of the problems with the calendar book that we're reading, is that it's drawing back to older technology, not dealing in the particular. This is one of the limits, if there are limits, to Little Brother, is that the technology that it's referred to, although it's foreshadowing to the future, can't properly project what social media looks like or what the current present moment looks like in technology. So we're talking about contemporary, as in like now. But contemporary can also mean the spirit of. It doesn't have to mean February of 2017. Contemporary can mean the spirit of 2017. So what are youth or young people like at this particular moment? What's the spirit of that? And then can we see that spirit in different times and spaces or places across a historical trajectory? So contemporary, for the most part, referring to the here and the now. And we know that social constructions are time and space dependent, so the here and the now is actually very important to understanding contemporary children's culture. That's the contemporary. Children, again, refers to, or children's culture, if we put them together, refers to not only the representations of children's lives, but their real lived experiences as well. So we want both of those parts, not just the social construction, not just the real lives, but we want the actual dialogue or the intersection between those two terms. So if we take it then and we have a definition of that, then the next question we have to ask ourselves is this real? is contemporary children's culture real? Because, one of the big questions is, are social constructions real? And I think what's important for us to recognize is contemporary children's culture is real and it's not real. It's yes and it's no. It's not real because it's a made-up term. I just told you that. It's a phenomenon. And it refers really to a set of social relations and social constructions. And those social relations and social constructions are based on adults as much as they're based on children. So is contemporary children's culture real? Well, no, it's a social construction, or it's based on a set of social constructions that are largely due to adult ideas, adult influences, adult feelings, adults' hopes and dreams and fears and ambitions, and adult rules. And so in many ways, contemporary children's culture is largely a construct of adult ideas, and therefore it can't be real because it has no child influence in it whatsoever. At the same time, because children live their real lives inside of adult-dominated spaces, always, right? No matter where we find children, we'll find adults, and therefore children as a group of people always exist inside adult-dominated spaces. So because they live their lives always in dominant spaces, in spaces where they are dominated, contemporary children's culture is very real, even if it's largely constructed by adults, because there is a gap between where the construction happens and how young people actually live their real lives. And it's within that gap that we find contemporary children's culture. So even if it's based on a set of social variables and a set of social constructions and governed by a set of social institutions, young people still live their lives. And so even though those social constructions are not real but have very real consequences, young people still live their lives in those spaces, and therefore it is very much real. So the answer to is contemporary children's culture real or is it not, I think, is it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't actually matter if it's real or not. The fact that the fact that we talk about it, we use it as a tool to explain a series of phenomena, be them social variables or social constructions, or be them real lived experiences. And either way, the intersection between those, the interaction between those social constructions of childhood and the real lived experiences of children, the intersection of those, the interaction of those, that's where contemporary children's culture is and always will be. And it has very real impact on the way young people live their lives. And that's the real point for us. That's where we want to explore. And therefore, is this term a real term? Doesn't really matter. It's more about the phenomena that it describes and allows us to explore and look at. So then the question that asks itself is, what are the main components of it? And we've talked about this already. Contemporary children's culture is built up around social variables and social institutions and cultural organization and practice. So really what we talk about, if there's sort of three big terms to contemporary children's culture, it's media, culture, and society. And so social variables divide and classify. Social institutions take those social variables that it's divided and classified and puts them into very sort of real spaces, and usually even in a hierarchy of sort of power or access to power. And then cultural organization and cultural practices legitimate these social organizations and these social structures, these social institutions. Cultural practice legitimate that. They make it very real in the everyday lives of children and adults as well. So media, culture, and society are sort of the core components of what makes up contemporary children's culture. And again, influenced by social variables and social institutions, cultural organizations, and practices. And so that includes things like race and class and gender, age, ability, sexuality. That includes things like religion or government or politics. That includes things like education or healthcare. So all of these things. And of course, because we're dealing with social variables, space and place are also very, very important. Time and space are very, very important to this. Historical moment, geographical location are very important as well. So these are the main components of contemporary children's culture. But where is contemporary children's culture actually situated? I said a few minutes ago that it always exists within adult culture, and I think it's very important for us to remember that if we take a look, if we were to suggest that society was a circle, right? Society is not a circle, but let's just say for argument's sake, this is our diagram. Society is a circle. Contemporary children's culture, all right, would be another circle inside of that little dark circle that I've just colored in. Contemporary children's culture does not exist on the outside, right, out here, this is not contemporary children's culture in relation to mainstream culture or adult-dominated culture. That's not true. It's not something separate or isolated or different or on the complete outside. Instead, it's something that exists inside of adult culture, inside of regular society. Children don't live in their own combines outside of like mainstream society. They exist directly inside mainstream society. So all of their understanding of who they are, all of their understanding of what they can or cannot be, it all exists inside of dominant adult structures, which is why media is such an important part to study, because we're interested in the way those stories get told and how, in the world in which the young people themselves are living. And so to study that, we've talked about exploring three particular voices: institutional voices for, institutional voices about, and then children's own voices. And of course, as we've always said, is that the institutional voices about children are the ones that describe who children are, what they can and cannot be. They're largely children are largely absent from these voices. They're mainly institutional in the sense that they're government, education, etc. They organize, they classify. Institutional voices for then take those ideas and they tell them to children in stories, and that's generally popular culture and media, whether it be books and whether it be movies or television shows or apps or whatever it may be. It's the way in which those ideas, those institutional voices about children are disseminated to children. It's the way the world is explained to children and how they belong to it. And then children's own voices, of course, are the way children take up these institutional voices as they engage with them and make sense of themselves and their own participation in the world around them. And again, just if you remember this diagram, and that's going to come back to you maybe in mirror form and backwards, but we have institutional voices about children, institutional voices for children, and children's own voices. And it's where the three of them overlap. It's where the three of them overlap that we find contemporary children's culture. So contemporary children's culture is situated inside regular society, inside adult-dominated society, and yet it's still its own unique space. And so our exploration of children's real lives and of representations of children is about the overlapping of these two. It's where children themselves and all that we're told about children come together. That's where we look to find contemporary children's culture. But how then is it constructed? How is it constructed? How is it put together? How is it organized? How is it labeled? This is part of the overarching goal of the course, is to unpack and explain these ideas. And what we realize is it's a combination of things. It's a combination of stories, so media, rituals, so culture, practices, okay, again, culture and society, organizational structure, and beliefs. And so what happens is it's through stories, it's through rituals, it's through practices, it's through beliefs that these ideas, these ideologies, that they move from being ideas to being actions. Stories, rituals, practices, beliefs. They take ideas, they take ideologies about who children are or what children can or cannot be, based largely on the fears, dreams, hopes, desires of adults, okay? And they move those ideas to actions. And then those actions themselves, they crystallize, they form into realities, or into the perception of reality, which, by the way, is just as powerful as reality itself, because all reality is perception. So you have these ideologies, these beliefs, these ethics, these values about what children should be, or who children can be, or what youth are, what youth can and cannot do. And through stories and rituals and practices, they move from ideas into actions, and then those actions, they crystallize, they become firm into realities or perceptions of realities. And that is how contemporary children's culture is a battleground between the institutional voices about children and for children, and the actual real lived experiences of children themselves. And as they come together, as those ideas and ideologies and stories, all right, come together with the rituals and the practices, then what we find is the actual realities of children's lives. We're going to stop video 1 right here. We'll take back up video 2 in just a quick moment, but there for you is a quick introduction into what is contemporary children's culture, and can we define it? Is it real? Not only is it real, but what are its main components? Where is it situated, and how is it constructed? In the next video, we'll take up Why media? What is media? How does media work? How do we study media? What does media have to do with contemporary children's culture? What is the social role of the construct of childhood and youth? And who benefits from this construct? Thanks.